Persuading people to take the actions we want can be hard. Our teams and clients are bombarded with thousands of messages every single day. But there is a way for you to get above the noise. Stories. This is the Stories with Traction podcast, and I'm your host, Matt ZAUN. Join my guests and me as we unpack the power of storytelling. We'll talk about topics like leadership, sales, and marketing, all through the lens of strategic storytelling. Enjoy this episode. You're about to listen to a storytelling FAQ sprint episode with Michelle Griffin. For those of you who might not be familiar with Michelle, she coaches on authority-focused personal branding to help professionals step out and be seen as leaders in their space. Since this is an FAQ sprint, Michelle will be answering a question on branding, and I'll be answering a question on storytelling. Let's dive in. Michelle, what is personal branding for entrepreneurs and business owners?
Matt, that's a great question because personal branding is such an important and hot topic term these days, and it sometimes gets misunderstood and misconstrued. So the way I like to define it and practice it with my clients is personal branding is the intentional and strategic narrative that you are creating about yourself to the world. It is not made up. And it is not fluffy and promotional and all about you. It is truly taking your expertise, your mission, your point of view, and communicating that to the world so that you're top of mind and have that emotional connection. You know, branding is the art of making a connection and a promise so the right people are attracted to you. And personal branding is no different. It's taking everything about you in the right context to communicate that to the world. Because at the end result, we want to be top of mind for the right people, for the problem we solve, and for those we're here to help. So when you have that strategic narrative, which I know you're going to really hone in the word strategic narrative, because I've heard you say that a lot, you are on your way to developing a real foundational plan to develop your presence and your personal brand for impact, growth, profit, and all of the things.
So I love the two words you mentioned in the beginning. You said intentional and strategic. It is not random. And I want people to really recognize that. I see a lot of random messages on social media and email blasts from executives. It is not random. It is absolutely intentional and strategic. So I would challenge everyone listening to think about, do you actually have intentionality and strategy infused with your branding efforts?
Absolutely. I mean, the strategy is everything. This is what I do in my work. I know you do in your work. Having a strategy is that plan to take where you want to, who you are, what you stand for, who you're here to help, and tie that to business goal. So for personal and professional growth, I even like to say, Matt, when you're doing it right, you're going to really hone those personal development skills that we so much need. And let's not forget the fact that we need more of this human connection, this personalization and humanization of our brands and businesses. And personal branding is that strategic way to do all of the above.
That is an awesome point. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Absolutely. So, Matt, when companies and business leaders are trying to tell stories, how many stories should one actually share?
So this is a great question, and I want to answer it with the people that I typically work with. Okay, so the individuals that I typically work with are C-suite executives, VPs, people in decision maker seats. So when we think about those individuals, people that are inspiring others to action, there's three buckets that they typically focus on: onboarding, sales, and marketing. So we'll touch on each of these three pieces. So let's talk about onboarding. Most companies' onboarding meetings are abhorrent. I mean, they're not positioning their new employees, their new team members for the growth that they want them to have early on. So what I challenge everyone listening to this episode to do is evaluate your onboarding sessions and ask yourself, are there stories being shared that tie into your core values? You know, one of the things that I normally say is don't focus on the words of your values, focus on the company core stories that exemplify the values you say you have. Okay, so let's say a company says we're a company of integrity. What does that mean?
Mhm.
Obviously, there's a textbook definition of integrity, but what is a story that really exemplifies that you are a company of integrity? And what you would do is you would share that story during one of your onboarding meetings. Okay. So you take that, you want to make sure that it's infused with these stories. So if you have 5 company core values, there should be 5 stories that are shared that really tie into and connect to those values. So, to answer your question, Michelle, from the onboarding piece, it really depends on the values that a company has. Do they have 5 values? Do they have 7 values? How many values are they trying to express? So, that would really dictate how many stories are being shared during that onboarding session. The sales piece, a really good rule of thumb is having 5 to 7 what I call hit stories. Just like there's hit songs,
Mhm.
we have hit stories as an organization or as a business. And these stories are what are shared in the sales process. So if you have a story that's really, really good, and you know that every time you share this story, the likelihood of you closing a sale goes up, that is a story you're going to want to share during the sales process. I recommend people focus on 5 to 7. Focus on 5 right out of the gate. If you get really, really good, maybe you add some more. But focusing on those early on, you're going to know what to pull from while you're sharing something with a prospect, right? So that's a really good rule of thumb. The marketing piece is a little bit different. So marketing, as you know, can be very robust. It could be very complex depending on your marketing channels, depending on the sales funnel that you set up through your marketing. So marketing can be very vast. So if you were to look at into my marketing story bank right now, you would see over 500 stories in that story bank. Okay. So it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stories. I used to have way more than that. I actually cut it down to 500. So just to give people an idea that you can have a ton of stories in a marketing story bank. But those are the 3 buckets I typically recommend, especially decision makers focus on, and then build out stories around those.
So again, it's like what I say, it's intentional and strategic, and you're really investing in the company and its growth by investing in these strategic stories, the foundation, your greatest hits, your greatest hit album, all the things you're going to be repeating again and again. But then again, it sounds like marketing is ever changing, but definitely put a deposit, a core deposit in that bank to start with. So that's such a great analogy, Matt, that really helps outline which stories, how many, and where, and most importantly, why. So thank you so much for that.
You just listened to the latest FAQ Sprint episode with Michelle Griffin. If you have a question for Michelle or me, please email me at matt@mattzahn.com with the subject line FAQ episode.